You're listening to STP Radio. Hello, STP Radio listeners. It's Mark Tomlinson, your host, bringing you again another riveting conversation with some of the thought leaders and fellow testers in our big tester community. Tonight, joining me on the air is Andy Tinkham, who is currently a principal lead consultant with Magenic Consulting out of my home state of Minnesota here in the States. But he's also a former employee of Microsoft and other smaller startups in the area, and the only guy I know who actually is working academically to obtain a doctorate in software testing. Andy Tinkham, welcome to STP Radio.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
It is. It's great to be here. It's great to be there, although in Minnesota I hear it's been hot recently, actually.
Actually, it's cool. It's cooled down again. It's in nice low 70s, perfect late summer weather here.
Oh, you're so lucky. The heat wave's kind of hitting us here in the East Coast a little bit. It's been like 90 something. But, I remember way back in 1994, there was I think it was 94 or 95, a summer in Minnesota. I think it barely got above 50 degrees, like almost all summer. Maybe I'm just blurring my memory there. I don't know.
It's possible. It does get cold here, but most of our summers are nice.
It's true. Along with the mosquitoes. So make sure you have a non-DEET-based mosquito repellent.
Actually, my neighborhood has a lot of bats. My wife and I were out just walking the other night, and there were a bunch of them just flying overhead. So not that many mosquitoes to deal with either.
People don't think about it, but there should be more bats because they're mosquito eaters. Like one mosquito will eat like 1,000. One bat will eat 1,000 mosquitoes. That would be weird the other way around.
It would, yeah. Those would be big mosquitoes. Which rumor has that someplace in Minnesota they have mosquitoes
that's right.
that big.
Now, you and I have connected a few times when I've been back teaching in Minnesota with the TCQAA. Tell me a little bit about this concept that you and I were just chatting about. This idea of lenses of testing, where in testing. Just kind of kick us off and explain what that is as a metaphor and kind of where you got into thinking about it.
Well, the concept came to me as I was doing a lot of the consulting work. Well, I'll go into an organization, and I often go in to give them an external view of how their testing is going.
Yeah. And
I found that there were places out there that had a very narrow focus as they were testing their application. Mm-hmm. They'd have some requirements for the application. They would then come up with a set of tests where if the requirement says when the user does this, that should happen. And so they say, okay, they dutifully put in a test, do this, verify that happens. And so they've been focusing their efforts around that view of the application.
Yeah.
And it really solidified then for me with one particular client where they had me come in to do some training.
Yeah.
The client is in the healthcare industry. They had a lot of testers who are former nurses and clinic employees. Okay. And then they had some people who were strong testers as well, and they wanted to have a baseline of testing knowledge, some very simple stuff.
Yeah. So the subject matter experts would gain a little bit more knowledge about how testing is wrapped around their knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And one of the things that I did at that point in time to emphasize this different perspectives, this looking at the app from different alternatives, which was to give them a bad spec. I don't know that I could do a much worse spec and still have a spec. The exercise was basically a secure version of Notepad.
Okay.
So we're re-implementing all of Notepad, but we're putting a login dialog on the front.
Okay.
And I never really explained why we wanted the login dialog on the front, but the spec basically was we want the secure notepad because we want people to log in before they can see their files. Which I guess is kind of why we want it there. But
sure.
Here is a sample login dialog that looks something like what we want. And then all the other notepad functionality should be there. And I just went through all the menus, the context menu, and just listed out the menu items.
Yeah.
So print, save, word wrap, all of these things that are in the menus there.
Yep. View, edit, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And had the class break up into groups and ask them, okay, here's your spec. You've got some time. Come up with a set of test cases for this app.
Yeah.
And they worked through it, and we talked through the results. And the end result were tests that were primarily happy path tests, positive tests.
Yeah, which you just described. It's sort of like, I know this is what I wanted to do, so do X, Y, Z, and that should be it. Yeah.
Right. And across 5 days of training, each day with 4 groups, only one class gave me more than one test for word wrap.
Wow.
And it's not that they were bad testers or anything. I intentionally framed the spec to point them towards that direction.
Right.
Then from there, we started talking about other lenses that we could look at other than the requirements. Risk being one of them, using not the prioritization side of risk-based testing, but the test design side, where for a given feature you start saying, what could go wrong?
Okay.
How would I know if that went wrong? Could I design a test that would tell me?
Oh yeah. Okay.
And we talked through things like Ricard Edgren, Henrik Emilson, and Martin Jansen did a software quality characteristics sheet that they have on the testguide.com.
Yeah.
Where they've got things like capability and reliability and usability and charisma. And all of these things are broken down into another level of quality characteristics.
Right.
Each of those could be a lens that you look at the application through.
Okay, so the metaphor then of helping people who are not testers to start saying, hey, you can just look at the problem differently or look at the subject of your focus with a different lens. And it worked with these people as you bring in what is a fairly rigorous body of knowledge from guys like Ricard and James Bach and all these other lenses. How did they receive this? Was it actually helpful to them?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
We specifically on the risk side, we came back to that word wrap feature.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about most classes only giving me one. One class did give me a second test case of turning it back off. And we zeroed in on that feature and said, how could this go wrong? And they started throwing out all sorts of ideas. The line is longer than the wrap length, but there's no place that the system can wrap at, no spaces or punctuation.
Yeah.
They came up with ideas like, what happens if it's set to wrap at it's okay to wrap after a period, and you have a floating point number that puts that decimal point right at that wrap character.
Oh.
Does it truncate off the number? They were coming up with these brilliant ideas, and in most days' class, I think we probably in the hour I gave them for testing, once we combine all the sets, we had somewhere in I think the low end was maybe 20 or so tests. The high end, maybe a group had 100 or so. But on average, we end up with about 50. And every day, this group was coming up with 50 plus tests just for word wrap when we started looking through. Just
for word wrap, which you'd think most people assume is something very simple, only because casually software editors computer editors just do that. And we just take for granted that it's going to work. Well, those are the little things that get you. Like, oh, we just assumed that was going to work. And then you know what they say about the word assume.
Yep, I do know.
Yes, so do most of the listeners, so we don't have to go there. But this is the point. Now, James Bach, I remember being in one of the tutorials, and I think he and Bolton also talk about the default perspective, or that, the default view, or in your case, the default lens. And was that the shift that you helped people get through from, say, day one in this, what your default lens is, and then start asking them to challenge that and look through different lenses. Would that be a right way to think about it?
It sounds like like a parallel thought. I didn't specifically talk about default lenses in this class, or I like the analogy, but really the default I've seen for many testers is the requirements is the default. So it's certainly possible that someone would have another default lens. You would definitely doing that sort of analysis, recognizing that there are all of these things. I mentioned the quality characteristics list of Ricard and his cohorts. Yeah. Elizabeth Hendrickson's test heuristics cheat sheet has a section that's got a bunch of heuristics, like the Goldilocks heuristic and boundaries and starvation and selection. All of those are lenses as well, where you could look at the application you're testing, the feature you're looking at, through that particular heuristic, and where does starvation apply? There's the resources, the CPU, the memory, the network, but maybe there's also a worker class which goes out and picks things out of a queue, and what happens when the queue is perpetually empty? Sure, the worker just keeps going out. There's the crystallization of this for me. There's a guy named Jesse Schell, who, if I look quickly at his bio here on the back of the book,
you're holding a book he wrote right in front of you right now. That's good. Yes, Schell. That's Schell for anyone who's looking it up right now. Yeah,
and he's a professor at Carnegie Mellon. Yeah, and he wrote a book called The Art of Game Design. Okay, like video games, board games, and that sort of thing. Yeah, and in that book, he's got a set of 100 lenses that apply to designing games. Okay. So, like the first one is the lens of essential experience. And he's got a card deck that goes with it that has all these lenses. That's what I'm reading off of right now. Yeah. And it gives us.
I love that phrase though. Essentially, the card of essential experience. Yes.
Yeah, and so then there's a note on it to use this lens, stop thinking about your game and start thinking about the experience of the player. Ask yourself these questions. What experience do I want the player to have? What is essential to that experience? Oh. How can my game capture that essence? And there's 100 of these different perspectives on thinking about the games and designing them. And I've started, I'm very early off on, but a thread on my blog where looking at these one by one and comparing them to testing. I'm doing that with Jesse's permission. He's curious to see where it goes, and I'm having a lot of fun coming up with them.
That's very cool. Now, so what are some that you've done so far? Was the essential experience seems good because this word essential is very subjective.
Yep, but at the same time, there is an experience that we want people to have when we use our software. True. It's not just for video games or something like that. For a productivity tool, you might want the application itself to fade into the background and just let people get stuff done. Mm-hmm. When I'm writing a document in Microsoft Word, I don't want to keep thinking about all the little options and how do I make this effect happen. I just want to get my words out on the document.
Or have Clippy jump up in your face. I see you're having problems with word wrap. Would you like me to?
Yes.
So anyway, so different card. I asked you, what are some of the cards you've sort of done on the blog so far that people could go see?
I think I've gotten through the first 3. There's a few more that are in draft post status that I need to get up there and get finished. So the second one is the lens of surprise. Surprise is so basic that we can easily forget about it. Use this lens to remind yourself to fill your game with interesting surprises. Ask yourself these questions. What will surprise players when they play my game? Does the story in my game have surprises? Do the game rules? Does the artwork, the technology? Yeah. Do your rules give players way to surprise each other? Do your rules give players ways to surprise themselves? And that one was a little harder to generalize. In general, surprises and things like enterprise software, not often correlated in people's minds, but there is And if I recall the blog post right, I think this is the direction I took it in then. If not, we got another blog post addendum to do.
That's fine. Let's go. Yes, exactly.